All right. Good morning, Doug. We're going to talk today about foreign aid and altruism and charity and everyone's favorite topic, and relating specifically to a couple books that you've read recently and some contrarian thoughts you have on the topic.
Yeah, I dislike, in fact, I despise foreign aid. And I dislike charity too. I think charity destroys both the giver and the receiver. So we can talk about that in the context of this last book that I broke it into called The White Man's Burden. Talk about a politically incorrect title. But actually, the last book that I've read in whole is this, Poodle Springs by Raymond Chandler. Now, it's what you call hard-boiled detective fiction. I'm a big fan of hard-boiled detective fiction. Now, how did I wind up with this book? Because I'm unpacking tons of boxes, and I think I'm accurate when I say tons of books. I'm not even counting the boxes. I'm counting these books by the ton. Anyway, I found this. I said, oh, this is interesting. I love hard-boiled fiction. I like Raymond Chandler. And I picked this book up in particular because of the title, Poodle Springs. And as you may know, I'm a big fan of poodles. As you'll discover, I have 4 poodles on the estancia down in Uruguay, okay? The only full-size poodles, including 1 king poodle, in all of Uruguay. So, yes. Anyway, Poodle Springs, because it's Chandler and because the title is Poodle Springs, I decided to give it a read. And then I looked at the book. How did I wind up with this book? Because it turns out that this book is an uncorrected review copy. And how did I get that? I asked myself, but then the mystery deepened because as I opened the book further, it turns out that it's autographed, not by Chandler himself, but by Robert Parker, who's kind of who writes in that genre, because this book was half written by Chandler and then he died. And so anyway, how did I wind up with an autographed copy of I don't even know. This is the funny thing, how time goes on. Incidentally, just as a tip to listeners that would like to read some hard-boiled fiction, for my money, the best is Mickey Spillane and Mike Hammer. I'm a huge fan of Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer. So anyway.
Yeah, you've mentioned Mike Hammer before.
Yeah, Raymond Chandler's pretty good. Anyway, last thing that I read, not a bad book, not the best of the genre, probably because it was half written and Parker did a kind of a half-assed job of finishing it. Anyway, then the next book I picked up, because I mentioned the other day when we were talking that, and here's the book that I found, How Can Africa Survive? And of course, I'm of the opinion that no, Africa can't survive because as soon as the foreign aid and the NGOs were actually both supporting and destroying the continent leave, the Africans just don't have the basic, they don't have, let me put it this way. It's well known that in the early 60s, when places like the Congo went independent, they had like 2 high school graduates and one college graduate in the whole country when the country went independent from Belgium in 1960. And that was typical of all these places like Equatorial Guinea and the rest of them. I mean, they're really, really backward. And since then, there's been a lot of building and construction and so forth, but it's not with local capital. It's not savings that the Africans have put together in a bank, where you save your kwaches or your pulas or whatever they are, the local currency, and you put it in a bank, and that there's capital in the bank. lends it out to a businessman who's creating a business. Not much of that. I don't think there's much of that stuff that's going on. All the building that's going on in Africa, it seems to me, and pretty much what this book says, philosophically unsound. And of course, when we talked the other day about this person, Jennifer Seymour Whitaker, she gets an endorsement from, of all people, Robert S. McNamara. You'd think the book would have been a big deal and she would have become one of the, big shots at the World Bank and all this type of thing. Because of course, McNamara, one of the disasters that he waltzed into after he nearly destroyed the country during the Vietnam War. Maybe it was before or after. Yes, it was before that. He almost destroyed the Ford Motor Company because the Edsel was basically his baby.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, he was, but everything he did there was a disaster, and that qualified him to run the World Bank, to run the war in Vietnam. And then after the war in Vietnam, he runs the World Bank. And I'll get back into the World Bank with this, but I still have to find out where this woman is, because she disappeared from the scene after writing this kind of unique and very on-PC book, asking, can Africa survive? Okay, so then, as I'm unpacking these books, the next thing I find, of all things, is The White Man's Burden by somebody like, by the name of William Easterly. And this book is endorsed by everybody, by the New York Times Book Review and Business Week, and just one after another. They're all, and the name of this book, and the subtitle of this book is Why the West's Efforts to Aid the Rest, why the West's efforts to aid the rest have done so much ill and so little good. Well, he's absolutely right. It's been an unmitigated disaster for the recipients of, as he points out, up to 2000, let's see, was it 2015 or 2005? I forget, but the numbers are inaccurate anyway. $2.3 trillion of money has been flushed down the rat hole in foreign aid in these third world countries. And he points out it's basically all wasted. Well, I said, oh, this might be an interesting read. He might give me some anecdotes. I might learn a few things here. So I started reading the book, and I'll go through it because it's not badly written by this deep state guy. Anyway, so.
But he is a deep state guy.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. And I'm interested in finding the rest of his views. This is the kind of book that I want to skim, but there's a lot of little snippets that I'd miss otherwise. So he starts out on the first page talking about Gordon Brown, who was the Prime Minister of England. And it's hard to pick the worst Prime Minister that England's ever had, but Gordon Brown. Well,
he's in the running.
Yeah, he's in the running. Among other things, Gordon Brown is responsible for having sold the last of Great Britain's gold reserves. I understand that Britain, the Bank of England, has no gold. He sold it all. And when did he sell it? He sold it in about 2002, and he bottom ticked the market. He got like $250 an ounce for it. I mean, this guy, like all of these famous deep staters, they waltz from one disaster onto another, but they all join ranks and they all praise each other and so forth. So anyway, another one of Brown's cockamamie ideas was to have a Marshall Plan for the world's poor. Well, that sounds pretty good. The Marshall Plan was supposed to have salvaged Europe after the devastation of
I've heard the myth. I've heard this myth before, I think.
It is. It's a total myth. In today's dollars, I have to look it up. How much did the U.S. throw at the Marshall Plan? Well, I can't remember exactly, but it was a fraud and a swindle. They say it rebuilt Europe. It's not really true at all. If you wanted to rebuild Europe, you would have had businessmen make investments in Europe to do productive things, as opposed to just giving money for infrastructure and God knows what, building bureaucracies, rebuilding
Right.
governments. That's what the Marshall Plan basically did. It's rebuild the European governments.
Mhm.
Basically what it is. So, like most people, most of the things that people think they know, well, who was it? This Will Rogers, I guess, said this. It's not the things that people don't know. It's the things that people think they know that just ain't so.
Yeah.
So, the Marshall Plan was a disaster and a swindle. It built bureaucracies among governments in Europe, and of course, depleted the assets of the American taxpayer.
Mhm.
And worse than that, it denied American businessmen the opportunity to make a lot of money by rebuilding. So
Mm.
the US could have been enriched instead of impoverished. Anyway, this moron goes on to suggest that we have a Marshall Plan for the world's poor, okay? As if it was a good thing. Now, what's he suggesting here? And remember, this is in a book that says that all this aid has basically been a catastrophe. He's completely right. But why is it a catastrophe? Well, of course, because it's been done the wrong
Way.
He's right. Now, this is like socialism in all these countries, like the Soviet Union and China and Cambodia that tried it. Good idea, just executed not quite the right way. So anyway, this is what this guy goes into now. He makes some very interesting points. Okay, so the 2.3 trillion, of foreign aid over the last 5 decades. And he points out, this is a good point. Well, why, since anti-malarial pills cost like 12 cents per day, and malaria is by far the biggest killer of kids in Africa, why out of that $2.3 trillion pills costing a dime a piece, why can't we get anti-malarial pills to the kids? Well, that's a reasonable question because it doesn't happen. They're still dying like flies of malaria, okay? Well, he goes on to say, well, it's not only the 10-cent pills, but $4 mosquito nets. I mean, why can't we get mosquito nets so that the mosquitoes don't bite them when they're sleeping? And then okay, $4 mosquito nets, you can buy a whole bunch of those out of $2.3 trillion, but there aren't any mosquito nets. So where did all the money go? Well, I'm sure he's going to get into this. He's got to. He can't be that much of a knucklehead. I'll tell you where all that money went. It basically went right into the pockets of the guys that run the NGOs who take a big, and then to the high government officials in these countries. And from there, the next stop is Switzerland or the US, where it's deposited in their personal bank accounts. That's where it actually goes. But he's looking for a way to get mosquito nets and anti-malarials, basically hydrochloroquine. I presume he never mentions that. But this book was written before hydrochloroquine became a politically incorrect medicine.
Yes. Well, it was still not taboo then. It was just normal.
Yeah, I presume that's right. And he points out interesting things like he says on a single day, July 16th of 2000. Here's a fact. I'll bet most people aren't apprised of this fact. On a single day, July 16th, 2005, American and British economies delivered 9 million copies of the 6th volume of the Harry Potter series to the public. In one day, 9 million copies. Well, when you see that can happen, I mean, this is an arbitrary consumable. Nobody needs the 6th volume of Harry Potter. And it costs about $15 or whatever a piece, $20, who knows. So, hey, why can't you get a few mosquito nets? If we can do this. So, so he points out a lot of interesting little facts like this. And he has a few throwaway things like, he goes on a little soliloquy about we ought to have good people like John Paul II, who apparently was a good pope. I don't keep track of these popes.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
But, he represents that he's a good pope here. And he says, I would rather have Madonna be the next pope than something else he goes into. And I ask myself, well, Madonna is the next pope. And well, of course, she's a woman. So you can't be a pope if you're a woman. He doesn't go into a sexist thing. That's not the reason why Madonna can't be the pope. But I mean, she's a notorious whore. The fact is that for the last 2,000 years, I'm guessing, but 80 or 90% of the popes have been worse than whores. They've been murderers and the worst possible kind of people. And the occasional alleged saint, but now we have one of the worst people, this, Francis, who's basically an Argentine Peronist politician and a horrible human being. But he got elected, just like this alleged saint John Paul II did. Anyway, I'm trying to read this stuff critically and try to get on the inside of the author's mind, because let me get into some of this stuff about this. So anyway, he's getting into the solution here. How do we solve world poverty? Okay, nobody likes world poverty. So, well, except for the NGOs. I mean, they're pretty fat. Well,
it's a good business.
A lot of people love world poverty.
It's great for business.
It is. It is. So it basically says you got two kinds of people in this game. You got the planners, and these are the ones that have these grandiose plans that always screw everything up. Okay, I buy that. But he says the alternative approach is the searchers. These are people like him that go looking for solutions that haven't been tried yet. Okay. And the one thing he doesn't mention in this is, wait a minute. Instead of giving these people free shit, which is basically turning them into serfs dependent on foreign stuff, how about just freeing up the economy so that they can actually build their little businesses and a sound currency, so they're worthless kwachas and pulas and zaires and all this other crap currencies they have are worth something and they can get ahead. It's never even occurs to this guy. It's a question of having the searchers figure out better ways to do foreign aid. And so that's what he's talking about here. It's just the basic,
Well, does he get into the next week we have on John Perkins, who is the author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which is it's very much about this sort of foreign aid kind of approach stuff too. Does he get into the World Bank kind of thing or anything like that?
I can't wait to find out. Because listen, this thing next week, anybody that's listening should definitely tune in to next week. We're going to talk to Perkins, who wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman, who is involved in all this stuff. And his book is all about the corruption and the stupidity and all that. Although I'm not entirely sure what Perkins' personal philosophy and views are.
Yeah, me too. So when I read the book originally in I think the late 90s, I was under the impression it was definitely spilling a lot of dirt on these organizations and the way that they operate. But he may also be one of these people who just feels like they're just not doing it right. I don't know.
Well,
we'll find out.
We'll gently but firmly interrogate John and find out what the facts are. So anyway, he goes on. Apparently, this guy's got a bee in his bonnet about somebody named Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who is an eloquent and compassionate man and has a better plan. So he goes into Sachs's plan, or actually 449 plans. Sachs has come up with 449 separate interventions that ought to be done to save the third world. I mean, talk about something that is, this is completely fucking insane. Who is going to run? What kind of an organization is going to run 449 interventions? Everything from, some of these things, I mean, they're reasonable sounding things like plant trees that would be nitrogen fixing and leguminous and add to soil fertility and, come up with an antiretroviral therapy for AIDS and, give everybody a programmed cell phone so that they have real-time data that they can communicate to health planners. Well, wait a minute, didn't I thought Obama gave everybody a cell phone that couldn't afford one?
I'm not sure he gave everyone in Africa one, but yeah, here he did. Yeah.
Ah, well, anyway, I mean, these people are so stupid that they actually think that these Africans are going to use the cell phone to talk to doctors about what they should do to solve their health problems.
It's like, have you been to Africa, or do you know any of the people whose problems you're trying to solve? And that's why I like the name of the title of the book, because it's weird. The whole white man's burden idea, was that a Victorian idea, or did it come from that era really, where they're like, we have an obligation to go help these
It's
groups?
a quote from a poem by Rudyard Kipling,
Mm.
which he quotes here at the beginning. And so the white man's burden. Does that mean that, these benighted Africans are our burden? Or does it really mean that these benighted Africans are carrying the white man's burden, as in, Gary Buona's, expedition stuff on its back as he goes through? I mean, it's a little bit unclear.
I always thought it was the idea the idea that, that almost as like as a Christian service sort of thing, that the people of that era thought that they needed to go and civilize these populations and teach them how to live properly, teach them all the things, because they were just ignorant and couldn't do anything on their own. They needed our help, and it was our obligation to help them.
After you bring Jesus to them, of course.
Of course. Well, that's part of the solution. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it is. But I ask myself, what's the matter with these people's, native religions? And the funny thing is that, Blacks that are in the US, who, as far as I'm concerned, hit the jackpot when their ancestors were stolen and enslaved. Because, the Black in the US is the worst off, ghetto rat, is better off than about 95% of his cousins back in Africa. That is just a fact,
Yeah.
So they're whining and complaining about nothing. I'm opposed to slavery, don't approve of what went on then and what has gone on throughout human history. Slavery's been with us since day one. But anyway, enough of Professor Sachs, who doesn't have a good plan because he's got 400 and some things that he wants to do. But then the author goes on to say, poor people die not only because of the world's indifference to their poverty, but also because of ineffective efforts by those who do care. Well, this is total bullshit. I mean, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to share everything you have with people that don't have anything? Is that really going to improve things? And does it make any difference if you care or you don't care about these people?
And I'm pretty sure the world is going to be very indifferent to my death. And I'm not poor, but I think that's totally reasonable. I mean, how could it not be indifferent to my death? It's
yeah, exactly. But you're supposed to care about somebody on the other side of the world that you'll never meet, you may not even like, who absolutely doesn't care about you, but you're supposed to care about him. Mm-hmm. As a general operating principle for these do-gooders, I would say, Maya, mind your own business. Okay. So anyway, it's full of this type of thing. But wait a minute. Look, I'm just scratching the surface of this book. This is like the first 7 pages here. He goes on to recount all the problems. AIDS is killing 3 million people a year. I don't know, have they solved the AIDS problem or not? This is unclear to me. Do you know?
What I do understand is it's treatable now, so that you can basically live with it and be okay, like, and still function normally. It's not. There are therapeutics that effectively treat it, so you can live with it just fine.
So people don't die of it in advanced countries anymore, but I wonder if 3 million people die of it in Africa every year.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't either. But, should we really worry? I mean, let me sound hard-hearted for a minute, okay? And rational and politically incorrect. Uh, what did Stalin say about this? He said, one death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic. He was right. Okay, one of the great mass murderers of all time was absolutely right. Okay, so the fact of the matter is that the UN, of course, I don't trust anything that they do or say, but they hire people, and sometimes the people are right. They say that by the end of this century, about 45%, 40 to 45% of the world's population, assuming the Deagle isn't right, and half of the population of Western Europe and North America isn't wiped out by 2025. I don't know if we've talked about that.
We have, yeah, and I hope he's wrong about that.
I do too. But not counting that, I mean, just trends continuing as they are, 40 to 45% of the world's population are going to be Africans from south of the Sahara. Okay. All right. Good, bad, indifferent. I don't know. Chances are slim that I'm still going to be here at the end of the century, or anybody listening to this right now is going to be here by the end of the century. So in a way, who gives a damn? But the thing is that why are we trying to preserve African kids who are going to multiply and add to the problem? I mean, if poor people who can't support themselves are a problem, why do we want to create more poor people?
I mean, it's a fair point.
It's a reasonable question.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that definitely is a reasonable question. I think well, go ahead. Sorry. But I think the biggest problem I see with all of this is that there's just like this effort to intervene, and people like the do-gooders, and it makes them feel good to solve the problems of other people. The further away the problem is that they're trying to solve, the better they feel about solving that problem. And it seems like, because it's a lack of understanding about the second and third order consequences, but where you convinced me on this idea, I don't know if you said it to me directly in a conversation or if I heard you talking about it, but you're talking about, the famine in Ethiopia and all the starving kids in the 80s. And when they had the whole "we are the world" thing, and we had all this huge amount of food that we dumped into Ethiopia to end the starvation there, and because of this famine. And the problem, what it caused though, is it caused all the farmers that were there. It immediately put all the farmers out of business.
That's right.
Now, they were having a bad year. It was a bad crop year. Okay, but we put them all out of business. And so guess what? The next year was a worse crop year because there were no farmers anymore.
You have to send them more aid.
Exactly.
And the farmers were all screwed, and they're right. Exactly. And the same thing happens with the clothing business. I mean, we ship thousands of tons of used clothes to Africa every year. All these church charities and all that. Oh, these poor Africans don't have a shirt on their back, which is oftentimes literally true. Let's give them a bunch of shirts. Well, what happens to the local clothing manufacturers? They can't compete with Free.
Nope.
Especially Free that's got a neat motto of a rock band on it. I mean, it's far preferable to just an ordinary T-shirt from the West. I mean, so of course, this is all part of how we are destroying Africa with good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So, no wonder Africans hate the white man. I mean, it's understandable. So anyway, he goes on to, recounting, all these people that are illiterate and the rest of it, and we got to do something about this. And then here's a little fact. and I like these random facts. James Wolfenson of the World Bank put on the wall of the lobby of the World Bank headquarters the words that our dream is a world free of poverty. And here, I don't know what kind of idiotic schemes Wolfenson came up with, but one of the things that McNamara was famous for when he ran the World Bank was trying to build steel mills. Where was it in Africa? I think it was Nigeria. Nowhere near coal supplies, nowhere near iron ore supplies, but the World Bank financed a steel mill for some kind of reason that seemed to make sense to him at the time. But it was impossibly economic, in addition to the fact that nobody knew anything about steel and there's no infrastructure. But hey, you need steel if you're going to advance. How are you going to build buildings? Otherwise, you got to import it all from Europe and China and North America. Anyway, so he quotes these people as if they're worth talking about. It just goes on. He talks about the United Nations, which is actually just a gigantic swindle for people from various countries to come to New York and live really high off the hog, playing big shot and scamming all that they can, all the money that goes through their figures. So, he talks about it, some gathering as the largest gathering of heads of state in history to eradicate poverty and promote human dignity and equality and achieve. But wait a minute, the heads of state are exactly the ones causing the poverty.
Exactly.
The ones that are destroying human dignity and starting wars and the rest of it. He never even thinks about that.
No, it's especially yesterday in the news was the gala dinner at the Met with AOC wearing a tax the rich dress. It's exactly like that kind of a thing. It's like a bunch of these celebrity type leader people get together, have expensive dinners, feel like they're actually doing some good for the world somewhere. It's like these people are just totally clueless, I think, about actually what's really going on in the real world. But
she's absolutely doing the right thing from her point of view, because she's already, I'm sure, a multi-millionaire and is going to become much, much wealthier when the padded book contracts and the six-figure speaking fees and the corporate directorships, very well emolumentated, and the consulting fees and the sweetheart deals. So AOC is going to do just fine, looting the rich.
Yeah, I think she's gonna be. Yeah, I think she's gonna be. She'll be okay. And she's, I think, a good marketer. She definitely promotes stuff well, and she's a. People actually really believe that she's like a real progressive, whatever. But and that she's really stands for but she's actually a kind of a foil, in a way. Like she actually gets, she actually has a lot more power to affect things that she says are important than she actually exercises, because she's playing the game. She wants to be around for a while.
Do you know if it's true? I understand it's true, but I don't know if it's true that there were a couple guys of Arab descent, I thought, that put up the money and the expertise to get her elected, picked out this.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was selected. She was recruited, essentially. She was they tested a bunch of different people, almost like a casting call. Yeah.
So how are those guys doing? And have we heard anything from them?
Well, I'll need to look this up a little more to get specifics on who they are, but because one of them I thought he came from Google, and then was responsible. He was like her chief of staff, but I'm not sure he's still there. I'm gonna look into this a little bit more to get more information about it, because I forgot.
It would be interesting, because how is she paying them a royalty or something like that? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the guy was already rich, so as I understand it,
maybe it was just for his personal amusement. to see if he could do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this goes on. Oh, there's one really sweet anecdote. I'll get to in a minute here. I'm not trying to read this book to everybody. It's just I'm trying to emphasize to people is the situation is actually beyond redemption at this point, because this is a complete piece of crap book, intelligently written, well written too, I've got to say, but everything in it is just about backwards, everything.
Mm.
So then he goes on to the fact that these political leaders at this grand conference where they're going to eliminate politics, they came up with the Millennium Development Code, and the 8 goals. The 8 Millennium Development Goals for 2015 are eradicate poverty and hunger. Okay, that's not going to happen because these people are actually causing most of it. It says achieve universal primary school enrollment. Now, you can't educate people. People have to educate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and putting them in schools, certainly in the US, but everywhere, are basically indoctrination camps. So these kids are being infused with the values that are actually destroying them and destroying their countries. So I understand. It's nice if everybody could read, but then promote gender equality and empower women. Well, should you promote gender equality? Are men and women equal? I don't think they are. I think they're equal before the law, as it should be,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not equal. Men are bigger and they're stronger and they're more aggressive. And, that's why men are usually the ones in the history books.
Mm.
So how do you promote equality by overcoming these, basic facts of nature? Maybe you do it by determining there are really like 50 separate genders, not just 2.
Right. Well, and I even what does it even mean to promote to promote women? What does that even mean in practice? Like, as a goal to promote the equality of women, if that's your goal, what is the action step that someone would take in there to do that? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, is it? You create a bunch of propaganda posters and you put them out? You only hire women for jobs in government? I mean, I don't, even from a practical standpoint, I can't even imagine where you even begin with that.
That's a very good point. I mean, all I can think of is that if I'm running a business in Africa, for instance, I want to hire the most productive person to fill a position. I don't care if it's a man or a woman. So why do you have to promote anyway?
But that's assuming you're trying to run a productive business.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how you solve the poverty problem too, incidentally. So this is just all kinds of bullshit, feel-good ideas. And then he goes on to say, well, and we have to reduce child mortality. Okay, I can understand. Nobody wants to see dead kids. Okay, that's unsavory. But and maybe if half the kids that a woman has don't die, maybe she won't feel obligated to reproduce so much, so that X number survive to support her in her old age. I mean, I understand that, but what are you going to do about the fact that Africa is exactly the place where there's a population explosion, which wouldn't be a problem if these people were producing stuff, but the standard of living is going down, except for free shit that they get from other places.
And but I think that's because the free shit that causes the problem with the standard of living going down. Because I mean, if you have to create a vacuum for there to be innovation to fill it. You know what I mean? Like, you can't I don't believe that there aren't people in Africa that aren't interested and take, entrepreneurial or whatever, that aren't going to that aren't going to try and solve some of the problems of their own life, if they aren't edged out by, the corruption or the rich white man coming in to help.
Well, and the worst part of it is that those entrepreneurial Africans, who are the smart ones, obviously, they can all see, wait a minute, all the money and all the power and all the good stuff is centered in the capital where the government is. The way you get your share of that stuff is get into the government, not create a business. And so
right.
It's all completely backwards. And then, so anyway, we have to promote health. And I've made this point before. It's that health is something that you are responsible for yourself. I mean, somebody can't bequest good health on you. I mean, they can bequest good medical facilities on you. So if you get a sickness or you
trauma, injury, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, they're two different things, but it annoys me when people confuse the concept of public health and medicine. Anyway, it goes on to talking about Gordon Brown and Tony Blair trying to end Tony Blair, another complete moron. And well, wait a minute. He doesn't realize that before Tony Blair, who replaced Margaret Thatcher took England from being a shithole, because I was there in the 60s and the 70s, and it was down at the heels, and it was a depressing place. And the Thatcher Revolution basically transformed the place. So wait a minute, instead of looking for Tony Blair, a soy boy with wrong ideas, wait a minute, why not just try to do in Africa what Thatcher did in England?
Yeah, I thought he was a searcher, not a planner.
I guess. We need the right kind of searchers. So let's see. It goes on here, but wait a minute. Let me give you a really rich anecdote. I love this. So at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2005. So I'd like to see how long the World Economic Forum, which really runs the world, because I mean, the UN is great for the grifters that hang out there and all that. It doesn't, it's just blah, blah. But I think the real heavyweights get together in Davos. That's the place that it all really happens. That's where the real.
It was founded in 1971.
Wow, just amazing that President Schwab has done very well for himself. So in 2005, he goes on to say, celebrities from Gordon Brown to Bill Clinton to Bono like the idea of bed nets we talked about earlier as the major cure for poverty, because you don't get malaria and you'll be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and you'll go out and do great things. And of course, there's some truth to that. If you're suffering from malaria,
you're not doing much.
No, you're not doing much. Okay, but then this is the funny part. It says Sharon Stone, who I didn't know was attending those things in those days, I don't know if she still is, jumped up and raised $1 million on the spot from an audience largely made up of middle-aged males for more bed nets in Tanzania. Well, I find that an interesting little factet that Sharon was there and at the world raised $1 million for bed nets. And, there was a movie producer, friend of mine, well-known movie producer. He's dead now, so I can tell this anecdote. And remember when Bill Clinton had Air Force One parked on the runway and was holding up all the other planes at LAX and all that? It was a scandal at the time.
Yep.
And they came up with some kind of bullshit excuse as to why that was. What was really going on was Sharon Stone was bullying him in the plane.
Hmm.
That is the word from somebody in Hollywood that was definitely in a position to know. So
Hmm.
anyway, good for Sharon. She's apparently right and upward mobile, but that's what actually happened at the area, when Bill was anyway. Oh, so anyway, what happens to all these bed nets, mosquito nets and so forth? Well, it turns out, and he actually mentions this here too, later, someplace else in this, is that people use them for wedding veils, and they use them for fishing nets to strain little creatures out of the water. And mostly, and they sell them to tourists that, their own, all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. They never use the things. So it's all just wasted money. So I'm sure he's got a solution for that too. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. If they could somehow just use the cell phone to maybe track their usage of them and then reward them for that, maybe like they need to get more micro managing.
chip each one of them, right?
I think that's my part of the Gates Foundation's plan, I think, ultimately for Africa.
Well, Gates apparently bought millions of the damn things. So.
And I mean, he's the polio vaccine down there that actually caused a new version of polio to emerge. He's responsible for that too, actually. So
he really does like sticking people with needles. I mean, it's like a personal psychological aberration.
yeah, a little sadistic, I
He's
think.
got all this money. Well, you say, hey, it's his money. He can do what he wants with it. Yeah, that's true. But if he was a real philanthropist, which he's not, he would deploy his capital to create more capital, which would enrich the world and all of humanity. But he doesn't do that. He pisses it away on counterproductive things. It'd be great if he was tried.
Well, it enriches his.
Yeah.
It enriches himself through his foundation still, it seems, more than anything else.
Yeah, well, he can't buy higher quality steaks, although I guess he's eating insects like everybody else is supposed to do. So he's got enough money that money is no longer an element. It's power is what it's about.
It's about power. Yep. It's weird though, but I think, the biggest thing is that people, that it took me a long time to get over this myself, this idea of, as I thought of, charity and, being like helping as a good thing and not understanding. It took me a long time, I think, to really understand that there are real consequences to that behavior, that you can actually, you can destroy a person by trying to help them too much, whether it be children that you raise and you protect them too much, you shelter them too much, and you make, you keep them from experiencing hardship. You're severely damaging your children in that way. And that's at least someone you're close to and you understand. Now, the world improvers that have this idea that they can, solve these really abstract problems like hunger, which is really abstract, really, because, it's not like, what does that even mean exactly? I mean, make sure no one's ever hungry, but what if they're 350 pounds and, they're hungry all day, every day? I mean, that's like, it's even hard to even imagine what does it even mean? It's so abstract, and you don't even know, you don't know enough about how food comes into how, it's all about basically people that it seems to me, these guys just, they want to feel good about what they do. And the further away the problem is from them that they're trying to solve, the easier it is for them to feel good about it, because they could just, write a check, send it to some organization which hires hordes of people, which, consume most of the value of that. And then, there's some paperwork that gets filled out and everyone feels good about it. And, things get worse, but oh well, that's not really the point. Is we get to go to the Met and I get to wear my new tuxedo, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the way it works. And certainly been to parties at places like the Met, especially the National Opera in Washington, which I've attended numerous times, the black tie events. And as individuals, I found some of these people that occur at these parties there, they're charming because their
Mhm.
social veneer
Mhm.
is on best behavior. But basically, they're all scumbags, or almost all of them are scumbags. Or actually some opera lovers that show up, which is neutral. But anyway, well, I guess more depressing stuff. I'm going to read the book. Finish reading the book, or most of it. But there's so many books to read, and what good does all the information do?
Nah, all it does is prove the points that we already know, which is why it'll be fun next week to talk to the author of one of these next week, to John Perkins, and just figure out. We'll learn a lot about these, the doers and the effect that they actually have on these economies around the world when we speak with him.
We should actually prep John a little bit by sending him an email and saying, John, it might be helpful if you watch this particular episode of our blog, and we'll give you something to prepare you, to warn you. Perhaps.
To warn you, and it'd be interesting to see if he cancels after viewing it. I don't think he will.
I don't think he will. I think he'll. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to talking to him because it was.
I am too, and I loved the book. I loved it. It really changed the way I understood the world. I mean, I think it was fantastic. Everyone should read it.
And for all we know, John has continued along the path, and he could be an anarcho-capitalist at this point. He might be.
Could be. All right. Well, I will send him this video, so ask him to watch it, and then I look forward to having him next week. And I guess we'll just leave it there for now, Doug.
Okay, Matt. Thanks.
Thank you.